Every season, I go out of my way to try every single show. I'm always on the lookout for that hidden gem and can't take the risk of missing it. As a result though, I'm also apt to drop anything that doesn't hold my interest, and the first few episodes are usually the defining point of that choice. So let's decide whether to drop or not everything of winter 2019. Boogie Pop wa Wara wa Nai. I watched the first 2 episodes as they were released together, and it's not good. I was really hoping for this one to live up to my expectations. I'm a big fan of those weirder punk stories that came out of otaku media in the late 90s and early 2000s, and this sounded like it'd be right up my alley. The issue lies in that it in no way makes me interested in consuming it as anime. For pretty much the whole duration, I was just thinking, man, I'd sure rather be reading the book right now. It basically feels like you're having it read to you, but the issue is, the way things flow in a book is fundamentally different. The visuals are dry and boring, it doesn't make much effort to spice things up, and this really kills it when you have huge uninterrupted expositional sequences, and little attempt at giving reason to be invested in the cast. The first episode attempts an emotional moment, but it simply doesn't make sense considering the amount of time we spent with the characters and how little we actually know about them or their relationship. Also, this dude's face looks like a brick. Egao no Daika. This was a lot better than expected. Granted, there were a few questionable cuts of animation here and there, but it's held up by a strong aesthetic and fairly consistent visuals overall. The main girl's pretty cute, and they characterize her well right off the bat. I'm already engaged in the setting purely for how strange it is visually. Their outfits are really over the top, but in a way that's amusing and interesting, the design of the setting just as uniquely abstract. The battle sequence is exciting and looks good, utilizing the CG well for some great dynamic shots. What will make or break this show, I think, is the political aspect. It could either end up being something that brings a level of depth and meaning to make it something special, or it could just turn it into a boring mess. I'm hopeful at least, as the show has already surprised me. Despite having the characters existing in a monarchy and our main character being the Princess Yuki, it acknowledges that it may not necessarily be the ideal political structure, and was initially founded out of necessity. Wiz. Wise? How do you pronounce this again? It's a Handshaker sequel, so technically it doesn't count, but considering how infamous it is, I don't think I'd be able to leave this one out. It's an impressive feat in visually assaulting one's eyes, but pretty much every joke has been made already. I mean, the show itself just is the joke. Ueno-san wa Bukyo. In the vein of comedic slice of life centered on convoluted plans and inventions like Tonari no Seki-kun and Karakai Jozu Takagi-san comes this new delightful little short. The titular Ueno-san utilizing a variety of inventions well beyond the confines of reality in an attempt to get the oblivious object of her affection to notice her romantically, but it always turns around one way or another for her own downfall. I was initially hyped purely for just how appealing I find the main girl's character design, but it did turn out to be pretty darn funny. I like that it's willing to lean in on the more gross and overtly sexual elements in a way that is really off-putting and uncomfortable, but it's precisely that sensation that gives it such a distinct comedic edge. You can't help but laugh at something so absurd. Dororo. It's good. Serious fantasy with a darker tone and great production, it's got all the trappings of something that could be genuinely fantastic. On every level, it is just well constructed. The direction, soundtrack, animation, story, I'm fully engaged and interested to see where it goes from here on out. Pastel Memories. Fascinating for all the wrong reasons. On the surface, it's bland and ugly, introducing way too many characters at once to care about any of them, but what grabs my attention is how grossly manipulative it feels. Set in a not-so-distant future, otaku culture suddenly died out and Akihabara is now a business district. The characters are going to fight so that people will remember, or something. It's bleeding with nostalgia, but for things that weren't even that long ago, and only function as nostalgia by way of its premise, in a way that feels like it's just begging for you to go out and buy things. Save Akihabara, save anime, dispense your income. I might watch more out of morbid fascination, but I definitely can't recommend it. Watashi ni tenshi ga maurita. I like cute girls. I like cute things. I like cute girls doing cute things. But unfortunately, I don't find this show all that cute. I don't mind something shallow, but it's at least got to appeal to my personal sensibilities, and here it definitely doesn't. The color palette needs more variety, the character designs are a bit too round and blob-like, and overall suffer from a general sameness. We're supposed to find this one girl as angelic as the MC does, but it doesn't really come across, she just looks really plain to me. That compounded with the main character just being kind of annoying made me lose interest pretty quick. Circlet Princess. Imagine having the broad swath of creative options when you set your story in the future, and you choose to go, yet again, with the most boring, generic choice. Clean-cut blue and white, nondescript random hovering screens that don't make the slightest bit of sense if you think about it for more than a second. Everything about this visually immediately presents itself as not trying in the slightest. Dinshi, Akoda-chan. I think I'll pass on watching the 20-minute interviews that follow this 3-minute short, but the short itself was entertaining. Not overtly funny, but having this general dry comedic vibe to it by way of its pacing, use of music, and crude visuals. I definitely don't mind 3 minutes a week of this pleasantly strange, jazzy show. Kemuri Kusa, the new project from Kimono Friends director Tatsuki. I haven't seen Kimono Friends, but I sure would like to now. Great sense of atmosphere and framing, it utilizes its admittedly limited CG animation really well. It still pulled me out of it here and there, mostly during the more intense moments of character acting due to its inability to match the vocal performances, but it makes up for its limitations with a really strong, memorable aesthetic. I'm interested in learning more about this world, and the characters are already pretty compelling, even if the male character that's introduced as a fish out of water seems a bit too perfect of a human to be believable. Tokyo nin wa hisa, tokidoki atama no e. Lost me before I even made it to the cat by being super visually unappealing and its attempt at emotionality just stupid. He's traumatized cause some kids spoiled the book for him? Really? Meiji Tokyo Renka. This show sits squarely in every shoujo thing you can think of, but you know what? I like shoujo, even the cheesy stuff. When it's not being uncomfortably rapey, that is. Which this isn't, so far. It seems pretty self-aware of its silly premise and introduces a cute and compelling main, with a pleasing aesthetic and overall quite solid production. Yakusoku no Neverland. Not a fan at all. Obnoxiously overbearing tone, some of the worst exposition I've seen in a while, and a cast of characters I couldn't care less about. They literally just explain to each other their personalities. I'm the smart one! It's like, actually, you know what? Just go watch Urban's video. Dimension High School. It's kind of impressive how bad this show looks. Not only are the live-action segments pretty sloppy, where are all the other students? The animated bits somehow look even worse with ugly mocap and stock assets. It could have been fun if it played into the campiness more, but as it stands, I can get something more visually appealing and entertaining by watching VR chat highlights. Girly Air Force. When your dramatic opener makes me laugh out loud, you're probably off to a bad start. Seriously, just listen to that soundtrack. How am I supposed to take that seriously? Doesn't help that its visuals aren't much better either. Grimm's Notes, the animation. Grimm's Notes falls into the common trapping of anime game adaptations wherein they just kind of assume you already know the story and characters, and it ends up just being fan service for people who played the games, but completely alienating for those unfamiliar with it. There were a few nice cuts of animation in the first scene, but as it ran on I grew more and more disinterested. The soundtrack is nice though. Gotoben no Hanayome. This ecchi harem comedy actually managed to get a few chuckles from me, but purely for its dialogue, which led me to the decision I'd rather just read the manga, considering its animation isn't great and they seriously butchered the character designs. Like, they're actually cute in the manga. Maho Shoujo Tokushin. Ugly, 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 ugly. Kaguya-sama wa kokurasetai tensai tachi no renai sunosen. This is everything you could possibly ask for in an adaptation, understanding what made the source material good while building on it even further. I've been following the manga for this one for a little bit, and I'm super happy with how it was translated. Rather than a straight panel-by-panel adaptation, it builds on the hectic absurdity with constant shifts in perspective, abstract backgrounds, and changes of color palette, and all sorts of little details that add to the experience. The pacing is impeccable, all the jokes land, and thanks to its mix of a bigger overarching joke with lots of smaller ones within it, even if one doesn't land, it won't be long till the next one. I love rom-coms, tropey or no, but if my experience with the first episode and the manga is worth anything, this series is shaping up to be something really exceptional. Bermuda Triangle, Colorful Pastoral. It's really such a shame. Pretty watercolor backgrounds and a lax atmosphere set underwater, it would be the perfect show to chill out to, if the characters' eyes didn't all look like they were copy-pasted with a random warp effect on them. I just can't look at that. Huraing Babies. I'm sorry, was I supposed to be paying attention to the story? I'm completely captivated by this show's amazing aesthetic. Those fall reds and oranges, the use of opposing colors for the outline in the filled section, this overall fantastic light and comfy visual style. I love the looseness to the character designs and setting. Everything about this show is visually distinct and fantastic. I could gripe about how the show introduces the characters in a pretty lame, super expository manner, but it looks so nice I honestly couldn't care less. Endro. Endro's got me a bit on edge. I like the cute, colorful aesthetic and character designs, and it has a pretty fantastic soundtrack to boot. Lush orchestral pieces that capture everything you could possibly imagine when you think of adventure. My issue is that it just feels kind of standard. Nothing about this fantasy world in particular stands out much from any other, and the same can be said of its cast of characters. Not annoying, just kind of plain. I feel like I've seen these same characters many times before in other shows with an ensemble cast of cute girls, so watching their interactions ends up being kind of boring. It is overall well put together though, and its little gimmick of the demon lord they are training to fight being their teacher in disguise who is trying to sabotage them after being transported back in time could be amusing. I could see myself dropping it down the line, but for now I'm willing to stick with it. Koya no Kotobuki Hikotai. You ever watch an analysis video that's basically unlistenable because the person edited out their breaths but forgot to leave the space there? That's what it felt like watching this show. Forget the weird blend of some characters being 2D and others 3D, what put me off is the pacing of the dialogue. Like, every line of dialogue spoken continues in a seamless, uninterrupted line. The second one character stops talking, another picks right up, to the point I felt like I couldn't breathe. And it's not like what they're saying is a fast-paced humorous monologue or anything. No, they're just talking. And none of it was all that interesting either. I want a good steampunk show as much as the next guy, but I don't think I could stand to listen to much more of this show without going crazy. Tate no Yusha no Nareagari. Shield bro, dude! It was pretty good. I don't have much of a take on this one, especially not one that's going to be particularly original or interesting. It's got solid production, a cool world, and an interesting premise. Virtual-san wa miteru. Maybe if I watched or cared about any virtual YouTubers, this show would do something for me, but nah. Revisions. Life is too short to look at mediocre CG. Domestic na Kanojo. This show's about as melodramatic as it gets, and from what I've heard it only gets even more so as it progresses. That said, I don't mind some melodrama now and then, and this show works with competent production and characters that are just interesting enough for me to want to find out what happens next. Sure, it gets goofy, but the show itself is pretty self-aware of that too. It ain't no masterpiece, but I'm down to see where it takes me. Plus, it's got a kick in OP. Monaria Friends. An adaptation of an event in the Rage of Bahamut game. It was strange, but I'm intrigued. The girls are pretty cute, and I really appreciate the touch of having the dragon girl have a shirt that actually makes sense for her physiology. It's establishing a little romance between these two princesses in this fantasy setting. While it did get a bit silly at times, like with a dramatic fast pan out when the one girl finds out the dragon gal waited for her the whole time, overall I was compelled. It managed to get me emotionally invested in just one 10-minute episode, and it effectively conveys all the essential information through dialogue that feels natural. The biggest issue is that it feels kind of off. It's hard to get a grip on what type of tone it's going for at first, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what mainly created this off-putting sensation is the sound. The sound design is just wrong. There's a scene with a big crowd, and it sounds like the oral equivalent of those movies where there's a huge crowd of extras, and their attempts at acting like they're conversing are comical at best. The mixing is sloppy and the sound effects cheap. The soundtrack put me off too at first, as it feels almost like it belongs to an entirely different show, but as it went on it grew on me, and I think its first impressions are hurt by the general bad audio mixing. That said, I'm still invested, so I'll keep going with this one. There you have it, folks. Every Winter 2018 seasonal has been dropped, or notted? I know I missed Star Twinkle Precure and Monica no Rikun, but one won't be out till next month, and the other I literally can't find anywhere. Also, sorry Mudan, I came up with this name before I even knew about your Watch or Not series. And there's really only so many title variations one can come up with for the Finish or Fail-esque formula. Be sure to let me know your thoughts, agree or disagree on this season in the comments down below. And also let me know if you'd like for me to make this a regular thing. If enough people want it, I'd definitely be down. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/kororeviews. Special thank you to my patrons Talon, Frogus, and Roggle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.